Olá! Conseguiu dormir bem de ontem para hoje? Pensou em seus porquês? Esperamos ter inspirado você. Hoje é dia de desenvolver o como. Não basta termos propósitos se não soubermos aplicar as melhores práticas e, no fim das contas, transformar os negócios e a vida das pessoas. Como diz o Clóvis, quebrar o galho de alguém. É por isso que trouxemos desenvolvedores de comos para a nossa prévia. Professores que, além do excelente currículo, desenvolveram a arte de fazer e criaram reputação. São eles que nos ajudarão a pensar e a criar o novo futuro. Depois da aula, eu vou te falar sobre uma novidade incrível que estamos preparando para os participantes da prévia. Seu curso Reset agora está disponível. É hora de entender como realizar seus objetivos na prática por meio do conhecimento técnico das ferramentas mais recentes e inovadoras do mercado. Nesta aula você aprende com o Chou em primeira pessoa alguns conceitos da gamificação e como eles podem ser aplicados ao mundo dos negócios. Yu, é com você.
As the sweet spot of gamification are things that are extremely important, but potentially mundane or boring. Things that people should do, but they don't really want to do. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the course on games, gamification, and game thinking. This is section 3 of your entire journey, and I love to dive into it and explore this topic. So, quick background of mine, my name is Chou, and I have actually been a pioneer in gamification since 2003. So it makes me a very early pioneer in the industry. And now I run 2 companies. I'm the CEO of the Octalysis Group, which is a design and consulting company for gamification. And I am also running an education platform called Octalysis Prime. So last year we did some calculations and we saw that my consulting company and design company, the products we've made have empowered over 1 billion user experiences. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean there is 1 billion unique human beings, because let's say Lego and Microsoft and Volkswagen would have the same human as their customers, but we would count that as 3 separate users for practical purposes. But it's still nice to see that our work in gamification creates such a big impact. I regularly do these talks at places Stanford University, at Google, at Tesla, IDEO, Boston Consulting Group, Porsche, lots of these places. And I've been featured as the #1 gamification guru in the world for many years in a row. And then later on, I became a judge. So apparently I am disqualified to be a guru. Now, here's some companies that I've worked with in the past and the companies have helped. So one big misconception is that, hey, look, I do gamification and therefore I work with a lot of gaming companies. But in fact, I work with almost no gaming companies, because the sweet spot of gamification are things that are extremely important, but potentially mundane or boring. Things that people should do, but they don't really want to do. And sometimes these are fields that are very competitive, like retail, right? You just really got to do something different to stand out. So it's important to know that gamification does not equal games and playing games, but it actually is about applying game designs to make things successful. I wrote a book. It's called Actionable Gamification. It is quite popular in Brazil too, but if you go to yukichou.com/books, it'll take you to Amazon, and you should be able to pick up a copy if you feel like this part of your course journey is interesting. And we talked about, I have an education platform. It's called Octalysis Prime. So basically I make lots of educational videos and I help a community solve their problems with gamification. It's a gamified platform to learn about gamification. So it is something that I'm very passionate about. And so if you can also think about checking it out. So before we talk about games, I always like to talk about gamification and how it connects to the games we're playing, right? So why think about gamification in general? And so when we think about games per se and who plays games, a lot of people actually think about people like these, little kids who are, just having fun, enjoying, they don't have to do other responsibilities in their life, or, young male guys who are single, unemployed, and eat pizza onto their jeans. But interesting enough, the average demographic of gamers can be very surprising. So the average gamer is 35 years old. 68% of these gamers are over 18. 47% of these gamers are women, which means that there's actually more adult women playing games than male under 18. So what does that mean? If you look at this demographic, this is a pretty generic demographic, right? 35-year-old average, half are female. This basically says that everyone has the capacity to enjoy games as long as you give them a reason to, right? Not everyone plays games because some people think it's a waste of time. It's for kids. They don't want to do it because it's not their profession. But if you give them a reason to, everyone has the capacity to enjoy games. In fact, through our research, we show that everyone has to be playing some kind of game in their lives. For some people, it's their work, which is why they become workaholics and they hate taking vacations. It's like, why would you take them away from their favorite game and tell them to go to the beach, right? For some people, it's clipping coupons or invest in the stock market. Or some people, their game is to watch sports so they know all the stats. And only if you cannot find a game worth playing in the real world, that's when you go into the video game world to find that joyful experience, right? Because our brain needs that kind of stimulation. We need to find a way to feel like there's a sense of purpose and meaning. We need to find a way to feel socially appreciated and utilize our creativity and feel progress and accomplishment. And this is why games are so relevant in today's age, because there is a problem with people not finding these things that are meaningful in the real world. So they go into the gaming world to enjoy these. But as long as you give people a reason to, everyone can become a gamer. Everyone can enjoy games. It could be your coworkers, it could be your classmates, it could be your teachers, your employers, your parents, right? And many of you, probably your parents have played some kind of mobile game in the past. And that's usually very important to pay attention to. So what is gamification? Gamification is applying all the fun, exciting elements in games into what we call non-game/boring context. Things that you don't necessarily want to do, but you just kind of have to do. And a lot of times in life, we do feel like there's two parts in life, right? There's the things that you have to do, study, do your taxes, trading. And once you finish those things, you can go to the other side, which is basically the things you actually enjoy, play games, watch movies, hang out with friends. And I always feel like that doesn't really make a lot of sense because, why can't we just learn from games, learn from the things we enjoy doing and apply that to the things that we need to do? And if we can do this well, that means everything we need to do can actually bring joy into our lives, that we actually want to do it. We can't stop ourselves from doing those important things. And so as a result, everything we do will be enjoyable and people will like their work. They'll like to study. I think people will perform better. Their companies will be more efficient and society will overall be more productive. And I just think that's a win-win-win situation. And this is the essence of gamification, right? Applying that game design into the non-game/boring context. Now, in my mind, gamification actually combines a lot of different disciplines. You have to do a lot of things well to have good gamification design. You need to understand game mechanics, obviously. You need to understand motivational psychology, behavioral economics, technology platforms, neurobiology. It would be even better, UX, UI, and business systems that drive a return on investment. And so some people might think, hey, that's a pretty arrogant thing to say, right? How can one field of gamification cover so many other very respectable and detailed and advanced fields? And I would say, if you think about it, you actually need all of the things above to have a successful game, right? To have a great game, you need to have good UX, UI, user experience, user interface. If there's an economy, you should understand behavioral economics. If there's a technology platform there, of course, you want to understand that. You want to understand when dopamine fires in the head or when oxytocin fires, that's the chemistry in the head that creates this feeling of appreciation. The only thing a game does not have is the last one, business systems that drive an ROI. So games can just be fun, exciting, enjoyable, and people can spend 10 hours a day on it and it's very successful. But gamification exists only to create external value, right? Either people are healthier or they're buying more things or they're building more relationship with their loved ones. So basically gamification combines all the things that make a game successful into that business systems that generate ROI, external value. And that's why we marry the best of both worlds. It's enjoyable and useful and productive. Now, as a quick exercise, I want you to maybe pause the video and think about one game that you enjoyed playing in the past. Just think about one. It might be some social mobile game, Farmville, Candy Crush, Angry Birds. It could be more hardcore computer games like StarCraft, League of Legends, Halo, things like that. But if you don't play video games, you can also find traditional games like poker, golf, mahjong, crossword puzzles. Now, if you don't play any games in the past and you think that work is your favorite game, that's fine too. But hopefully you'll have some more interesting hobbies to think about. Now, think about what made that game fun and enjoyable. Out of all the games out there, what made that one game enjoyable, and you choose this one over the other ones. So through this section of the course, we will talk about a framework to understand our motivation and what makes things enjoyable. And then later on, we'll come back to this game that you're thinking about in your head and analyze it through that. So feel free to pause and think about what it is before you move on. And then think about what made it enjoyable. So is it more of the storytelling or the quests? And why do other games have the same thing, but you're not as interested in those games? That'll be our exercise to warm up your brain. So a lot of people like to ask me, hey, Yukai, do games actually change behavior? And my answer is yes. And, my example is this, right? People always say like, children, kids these days, they don't have any work ethics. They don't have any discipline. They can't persevere through hardship. But when it comes to gaming, kids have amazing work ethics. A lot of kids wake up 3 a.m. in the morning behind their parents' back to secretly log onto the computers, the iPads, and they start leveling their characters and they're playing the game, right? And honestly, waking up at 3 a.m. to do anything is already amazing, right? But if you know, like in role-playing games, RPGs, leveling up usually just means killing the same monsters over and over and over again on the same stage or same map for hours every single day. And for weeks, like in months, right? And so in the gaming world, this is called grinding. So kids would say, hey, I can't go out and watch a movie with you. I have to go grind for another 3 hours. And it's fun, it's addictive. They really like to do these things. But in the real world, this is called grunt work, right? If you tell people to do the same action over and over and over again with very small variations, and people usually think that's stuff we don't enjoy doing, right? That's stuff you give your entry-level interns to do. And they don't like it, but someone has to do the basic level work, so you give it to them. It's boring and torturous. Most people don't like to do grunt work. And so if we think of grunt work as the same as grinding and leveling the game, then we know that actually somehow, some way, these games are getting kids who again have no work ethics, no discipline, to voluntarily do hours of secret grunt work. And I believe that if we can understand why that is and harness that power, and then we can engage anyone to do anything, of course, if it is well designed. So some people say that reality is the worst game ever. There's not a lot of stimulus. There's not a lot of sense of purpose and meaning and creativity. And I think that's true for a lot of times. And in games, these are all around you. They're set up for you. In the real world, even though there are these things around, it's not so easy to come by. You have to go look for them. You have to make good choices in your life to be in those situations where you actually feel like you're playing a game and you feel appreciated. You feel like there's more unpredictability and curiosity, and there's more creativity. Life doesn't serve this to you, and you have to go find it. And I think a lot of people just don't know the rules of the game in life. And that's why they struggle so much, or they complain a lot. They don't know what's going on. But when you see life as a game, so some games are easier, some games are harder, then you take a more positive attitude mentality and you want to tackle these situations. Now, when we talk about gamification, there's actually a lot of terminology being thrown around because the word gamification seems very fuzzy, right? To gamify something is just to means that you make it more like a game. But what does it mean to make it more like a game, right? And everyone has different interpretations. Some people think, oh, it needs to have graphics, it needs to have animation, it needs to have points or badges or swords, it needs to have quests. So, and this is the awkward thing, right? Because it's very hard to define what makes something more like a game. And so the term gamification has a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that because it's so vague, it opens up people's imagination. If they feel like, oh, this is fun, this is cool, this is so intriguing, they'll be like, oh, look, that's gamification. And I've seen many people who walk to me and say, hey, look, this thing, it's gamification because we're so engaged. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess you're having fun. That's good, right? Of course, the curse is that it's so imprecise. It's by the wording, it's hard to say what is actually gamification. And later on, I'll talk about my interpretation of what gamification means and how to apply that to solve problems. But we know that in the industry, there are people who use different terms to describe similar things. So there is what we call game thinking. And the game thinking is an extension of design thinking and design. And so Amy Jo Kim combines design thinking, game design, agile, and lean UX system thinking into game thinking. So I think game design thinking is a big thing. And so you're very familiar with it. And it starts off with a design thinking process, and then it combines multiple things, added more game-like. So, game thinking itself. So at the beginning, we started with design thinking, and we merge that into other things, becomes game thinking. And then it's this process about hypothesizing, empathizing, design, playtest, and validate. So this is a process just by Amy Jo Kim. That's her thing. And she's a respected game designer. She made quite a few popular games in the past, and she's applying that also again into the business world, into startups, into having people grow. And so she calls her work game thinking because it is similar to design thinking as a foundation. But there's a lot of terms out there, right? Again, we talk about gamification. There's also serious games, which some people call it, this is a game that you can play, you can log in. Oftentimes there's animation, graphics, but the game is created to have a serious purpose. So we play the game and you get trained, right? Or you play the game and you learn something. And so I always think this is not a very good terminology. It's definitely a term that's probably not created by gamers, because I know gamers can be very, very, very serious, right? But so saying that, oh, well, those are not serious at all. And when the game has to create external value, or the game has to train people, then we call it a serious game. I think that doesn't make as much sense. Then there's some terms called advert games, which is basically advertisement, but it's a game. So you engage with the commercials, you engage with the scavenger hunts and all those things, and you even to like banner ads that like want you to shoot a duck or something. Those are all the advert games industry. So it is utilizing game design, and often it looks like a game, and the goal is to get people to interact with marketing, right? So that counts. There's some people like Sebastian Duterding, which is a friend of mine, who coins the term gameful design. And I think people like Jane McGonigal, a few people like this term. So gamification feels too fluffy, and a lot of platform companies, they just put points and badges into it and say, this is gamification. And so they say, no, we don't like that. We're going to call it gameful design. That's what we do. Then there's motivation design. So people just think we don't want to call it game. We want to call it just things that motivate people. And there's game-based learning. So basically, you are using a game to learn serious things and applying it into other fields. So there's all these terms, right? And so I tend to like to say, well, look, everyone's talking about the term gamification, right? You can build your own little hill and try to establish something there. But I want to be where the people are. I want to be where everyone talks about it and everyone's trying to learn it. And yes, even though there's a lot of gamification examples out there in practice that are not great, instead of abandoning that mountain, that crowd, and just say, have a little hill, I want to go in and say, look, I want to correct this. This is the way good gamification is done. This is better. This actually solves more problems. And so that's why I still call my work gamification design. I'm a gamification pioneer, because I don't want to just go away and do my own little thing. I want to engage with the industry, with the audience, and educate them and show them what is a better way to do things. And which is why I'm here talking to you today. Now, but if you ask me, I think at the core of gamification is something called human-focused design, as opposed to function-focused design. So most systems are function-focused. They assume that people in the system already have motivation to do desired behavior, and then optimizes for efficiency, for production, for being intuitive, for usability. And so it's a little bit like a factory where you know the people in there will do their work because you pay them to do it. And then you optimize for, again, production, efficiency, maybe safety. Whereas human-focused design remembers that people in the system have feelings, they have motivations, they have insecurities, they have reasons why they do or do not want to do something, and then optimize for that. So that's a little bit more like a theme park where you can design it to be really, really fun. And then you can predict that people automatically want to line up for hours and hours just to enjoy that experience. Now, what's interesting here is that in the case of a factory, you're paying these people to do Monday work of factory life, right? But in the case of a theme park, they're actually paying you to stand in line for hours and hours just so they can enjoy those few minutes of fun. Now, the reason why I believe we call this gamification is that the gaming industry is the first to master human-focused design, because there's no real purpose to playing a game, right? You never have to play a game. You have to do a lot of other things. You have to go pay your taxes, do your training, take your pills. So even if you don't like to do it, you just have to persevere and do it, right? But again, for a game, you never have to play a game. The moment a game is no longer fun and enjoyable, you leave the game, right? You play another game, you check your emails, you go to YouTube. And so because the gaming industry have spent decades or even centuries, depending on how you qualify a game, mastering how to get people to come back for every single day, doing repetitive activities such as throwing out a bird, throwing out a bird, throwing out a bird, or matching 3 gems, matching 3 gems, matching 3 gems, without a mandated purpose. We're now learning from that discipline, and that's why we call it gamification. And so this principle of human-focused design versus function-focused design is very, very important. One of my favorite function-focused design examples is Google+. So Google spent a tremendous amount of engineering resources and money building Google+. And they didn't just do it in like a little Google Labs experiment. When they rolled it out, it was everywhere. All your platforms try to get you to Google+. Your YouTube trick you to go to Google+. Your Gmail trick you to go to Google+. The whole organizers are pushing it. Google said, this is the one platform that should unify all their products together into one social experience. So technically, that would be the best technology Google could offer, right? Which arguably means that it's one of the best technologies in the world. However, some history, right? So most people who go on Google+, they're like, oh, I don't get it, and they leave. So I had some friends who worked at Google at the time, and they told me within Google, there's a joke. If you want to host a secret party and you don't want anyone to find out about it, you share it on Google+. That's how you keep it a secret. No one will find out about it. So as you can see, just because you have good technology, just because you have good features and functionality, does not mean people have motivation to use it, right? Another example is some people, they value a gym membership, right? They even pay for it every month, but they just don't go, right? They'll say, oh, I'm too busy to do it, etc. But throughout those 6 months that they didn't go, they probably had time to play some games, go to Netflix, use Facebook. And so it's not a real problem with time, it's a problem with motivation. So just because people see the value of your things, if you have good value proposition, it doesn't mean people will come. You have to motivate them to do the desired behavior through good human-focused design and gamification design. Now, there's a lot of different examples out there. We talk about the serious games, we talk about the game design thinking and all that stuff, right? So in my line of work, I really just have two extremes in the spectrum. So there's implicit versus explicit gamification design. Explicit gamification design actually looks like a game, feels like a game. It's gameful and magical. Whereas implicit gamification design does not look like a game at all. It's clean and efficient. It just looks like a normal interface, but it just has these psychological motivational triggers that just nudges you forward in the right direction. You just feel like, I don't know why, I just feel like I want to use this again and again and again. And I feel appreciated. And I feel like there's this thing that pulls me in. And so if you look at this spectrum, on the right side, there's one with a car, right? And it looks like a car racing game. This is actually a product we designed for Porsche in Europe. This is a loyalty program for Porsche owners, people who have these very expensive cars, to use it, to drive. And as they accumulate more resources in the app, it allows them to exchange for rewards and potentially even upgrade to another car more easily. The one on the most right, it looks even more like a game, right? There seems to be some game character, NPC, and they're talking to you, and there's a city you're building. There's all these resources like coins. This is actually a CRM system, a customer relation management system. Basically, this is to motivate salespeople in one of the largest fast-moving consumer goods company in Europe, for them to go knock on different doors and say, hey, would you like to buy our product? Would you like to buy our product? And so this is, and as they buy as people are buying their products, they can actually build their city and grow in this journey. So again, it looks like a game, feels like a game, but it really only exists to create external business value. And then when you go to implicit motivation, that's like a seller's dashboard on eBay, which we also helped in the design process. And so people go there, they don't think they're playing a game, right? The best type of designs are invisible. It's like a doorknob. You don't really pay attention to the doorknob, you just use it to open the door. And oftentimes if I ask you, so what color was the doorknob? A lot of people might say, oh, I don't know, was there a doorknob? I'm sure there was because I opened the door, right? So a lot of times when you look at different examples in gamification, you can see, okay, is this implicit gamification design or is it explicit gamification design? And oftentimes in our project, it will depend on what the client wants, the culture, our target audience, and then we'll set, okay, this is what we want in our gamification arsenal, and let's design a good experience. So there's a variety of gamification examples out there. And so I just want to show a few, but then we're going to go into more later on the what we call the Octalysis framework, on the foundation of things. But some interesting examples, for instance, Folded, right? Folded is something where scientists have been trying to solve this AIDS virus protein structure problem. And the best PhDs in the world couldn't figure this out to help with AIDS research. So and then they couldn't do it for 15 years. And so they decided to create a game. See, I said a game, which means it's what? Explicit gamification, right? And so they created a game called Folded, where people can just go on to download this and play this game where you're dealing with different molecules. You can change different things. You can shake it, and there'll be an objective such as maximizing surface space. And to everyone's surprise, this problem that no one could figure out for 15 years was solved by a gamer in 10 days. So you see here how powerful this could be, right? Medical research that couldn't be figured out, within 10 days, gamers do it, because that was a creative, fun process for people to do. Sometimes you'll have forums or communities that apply gamification too. So this is the SAP Community Network. They want a lot of developers and programmers to be here, talk about technical things and learn and grow. But it's not really part of their work per se. So people might just kind of be just a little bit interested. So they implement a reputation system, some systems that make you feel more gamified. You have a journey, you're going forward. And so this is more implicit, right? When you look at the screen, you don't feel like, hey, I'm playing a game. It's more of an implicit design. But this implicit gamification design increased active users by 13 times, like 1,300%, and the activity by 2,300%, so 23 times. And this is not just a site with like 20 people. This is a site that has millions of developers. So it's actually very, very strong that the active users got so charged up through this experience. So Then we look at an example like Autodesk. So Autodesk is one of the world's leading 3D imaging software companies. And, they have very good software, but it's pretty expensive. Some of them is like $7,000 a piece. So Autodesk sees that the best way for people to buy their software is to first download a free trial. And so what they did is they made a game, right? Called Made a Game. So it's explicit gamification called Uncharted Territories. And what it is that it gives you a passport and it pretends that you're going onto this journey to different countries and solving different problems. You're going to Istanbul, Turkey, you go to other places. And the problems you face will be like, oh, this bridge is about to crack and crumble. What do we do? Of course, the way to do it is to use your Autodesk free trial to patch up the bridge, solve the problems, and of course, it'll allow you to understand how useful and powerful this tool is, right? And so this gamified marketing design, so I guess some people could call this ad for games, increased trial usage by 54%, and more importantly, increased their sales revenue by 29%. When you're already a company that makes billions of dollars, it makes a big difference. So I want to talk about the trend of gamification. Again, I started in 2003 when people said it was super crazy, right? And now it's accepted by a lot of organizations, governments, people are learning about it. But I do see this, what they call the Schopenhauer truth hype cycle. So this is a German philosopher, and he says every truth passes through 3 stages before it's recognized. Number 1, it is ridiculous. Oh, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Second, it is violently exposed. Oh, I see how some people might like it, but it'll never work in my organization. And then third, it is regarded as self-evident. Duh, of course, I always knew it was gonna work, right? And sometimes you'll say like, yeah, that's funny, but that's not how the real world works. But I will tell you, actually, that is how the real world works, is interestingly. So many, many years ago, there's a time where all the companies and organizations said, duh, every organization needs a talent strategy, right? But this website thing, that's a fad. Where's the return on investment for that? Who needs a website? It's a distraction to business, and only fad chasing enthusiasts and conferences talk about these websites. And then a few years later, they're like, oh, duh, every organization needs a website strategy, right? If you don't have a website, you're not even a real business. But the social thing, that's a fad. Like, where's the ROI on that? Who needs social media? It's a distraction to our employees. And again, just fad chasing enthusiasts and conferences talk about social media. And then later on, they're saying, duh, every organization needs a social strategy. If you're not on social media, you're irrelevant, right? Oh, but this gamification thing, oh, that's a fad. Where's the ROI on that? Again, who needs gamification? It's a distraction. And again, just fad chasing enthusiast conferences talk about gamification. So if you are good at pattern recognition, you can probably see another column that'll say, duh, every organization needs a gamification or human-focused design strategy, right? And so we're seeing that trend of gamification become more and more popular and exciting. And that's like my journey too. At the beginning of my journey, gamification was just something in Silicon Valley, and at the beginning, everyone thought it was crazy. And then eventually, people in Silicon Valley felt it was pretty cool, but the rest of the US felt it was crazy, and the US and Canada accepted it. And then Western Europe started to adapt it. I got invited to speak at Denmark, different places. And then we have India that wants to learn Australia. They're starting to learn these things. Then we have East Asia, like Japan, China, South Korea, that wanted to study what I'm talking about, applying gamification. And then we get into Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Russia. And then finally, I'm getting more and more interest from Africa. And this is actually pretty interesting, right? Because this is actually a trend for most technologies out there. The internet started in Silicon Valley. Facebook, started at Harvard, but they moved to Silicon Valley. Google, Airbnb, Uber, a lot of technologies that are changing the world today started in Silicon Valley and is pushed out with that schedule, right? And it's kind of weird. It's like, yeah, then after a few years, Western Europe will adopt it, and then India, and then whatnot. So technically, it is possible for any one of these countries to say, hey, why do we want to wait for our turn number 5, right? We're Brazil, we want to be innovative on step 1. So can say the moment it's already popular in Silicon Valley, technically Brazilian organization company can say, yeah, we want to adapt it right now. We want to be in the forefront of the world. But just for whatever reason, cultural reasons, for just comfort reasons, this just is the trend for almost all innovation. Okay, I'll just say most innovation, technology innovation that I have seen, right? And I will say that with gamification, even though I say Latin America is the fifth, I think very early on, the biggest group of people that are fans of my work, study my framework, study gamification with me, they're from Brazil. So definitely Brazilians are very into gamification. It's really changing society a lot. So I'm pretty excited to just, again, share more of what I know to you guys. So there's a lot of gamification examples and studies out there. You know, I'd love to share them, all of them, but I can't because lack of time. But I do have a link that has 90+ gamification case studies with ROI stats. So you can check it out. It'll say this company uses gamification to solve this problem, increase their ROI by this. So, you know, I think this is a useful link to check out. Some of these examples are a little old. Also, I have high standards, so a lot of these examples are not the best gamification design. So hopefully once you've went through this course, you'll see how all of them could actually be better. All of them could improve. But this is usually a nice thing to tell people, hey, look, it is a standard thing. Companies are using it. You should take it seriously. And the problem is that Gartner predicted many years ago that 80% of the gamified apps will fail because of bad design, right? And the question is, well, why would it fail, right? And I think part of it is because agency and individuals claim to be experts and they really don't understand it very well. So when I started, I was just passionate about it. But when it became a money industry, a lot of people just jumped out and said, hey, I'm an expert. And they just read some blog post, took a workshop, and they're selling this service. And the problem is that they only focus on what we call PBLs, points, badges, and leaderboards. They'll just say, oh, we'll throw points at the system. We'll give them some badges. And they feel like that automatically makes it fun and exciting. And I think that doesn't make any sense, right? Because if you look at social media marketing, a lot of companies also think, oh, that just means creating the social profiles, right? And we know that social media marketing is more than that. It's really engaging. It's not just blasting things, because that's just media. Social media is interacting with people, engaging with them. It's social. It's not just media where you blast it. And so we need to make sure that we're not doing things backwards, right? So a lot of times the cause of failure for gamification is people are so obsessed with these game mechanics, things like points, badges, leaderboards, but can also be Easter eggs, could be group quests, all these things, instead of the core drives, you know, the knowledge that drives our behavior. So if you think about a bad game designer, right? A bad game designer could think, oh, what do I need in my game? Well, we need swords. Yeah. Where can they go? Yeah, let's put them here. Yeah, we need the monsters. Let's put them here. We need cows too, right? And friends that can fertilize crops. And it's like, oh, well, what about birds that have attitude, plants that shoot peas? You know, these puzzle games are very popular. Let's do them too. So you can see here that a game can have all the right quote unquote game elements, but still be incredibly stupid and boring. And if you think about it, every single game in the market has what we call game elements, but most games are still not successful. They're not doing well, and they oftentimes run out of money and they die. So it's not very realistic to think that, hey, if I just take these game elements, game mechanics that are even found in boring and failed games and put into my product or my process, my platform, it automatically becomes fun and successful. It just doesn't happen that way. Only a few well-designed games achieve the status of winning and being addictive. So if you look at a good game designer, instead of thinking about, you know, what game techniques or elements should I use, they start thinking about how do I want my users to feel? Some of them, I want them to feel inspired. I want them to feel proud or even scared from some horror games. And once you understand how you want them to feel, that's when you think, okay, what are the game elements that I need to motivate, to give them this feeling to accomplish the goal? Maybe it's swords, maybe it's monsters, maybe it's cows, maybe it's friends. But the key thing is that good gamification design does not start with game elements, but starts with our core drives. And so this is where we're going to introduce the Octalysis framework, what I'm most known for. This is why I'm here talking to you today. But we will be wrapping up and we'll be talking about the Octalysis framework in the next section after the intro, but we will talk about how it is something that is highly applied also in academia, not just business. And we'll talk about that credential soon, but very much look forward to seeing you in the next section.
E aí, curtiu a prévia do curso? Imagina então como será o conteúdo completo. Não sai ainda, pois eu vou contar sobre uma oportunidade imperdível para você que está participando da prévia. Vai ser daqui a pouco. E aproveitando que é o dia do como, queria contar a você algumas das coisas que estamos preparando para a pós-PUC-PR digital. É difícil resumir um a um os comos da nossa pós, mas vale destacar a metodologia exclusiva que combina hard, soft e superior skills, ou seja, técnica, comportamento e inspiração com hands-on e o nosso jeito de fazer, estética, conteúdo, conexões e emoção. A experiência do aluno é super valorizada por aqui, então você terá a figura do Community Manager, uma gerente de comunidade que cuidará da sua jornada conosco do início ao fim. Ela fará as conexões mais ou menos como eu estou fazendo aqui com você. Tem dúvidas sobre o pagamento? Sobre o dia da aula? Sobre a plataforma? Sobre trabalhos e notas? Ela estará aqui em primeira pessoa. Tudo isso você vai conhecer mais depois da última aula, quando eu também vou te contar sobre uma oportunidade imperdível para que em 2021 você trabalhe o seu Golden Circle profissional. Por enquanto, espero que tenha aproveitado o dia de hoje e que tudo tenha sido muito fluido. Aguarde a surpresa que espera por você amanhã. Até lá!